Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. How's everybody doing out there today? I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So I do have the round 27 game. They started playing Blitz in the Superbet Poland in Warsaw. And so, you know, they have the Blitz portion going on right now. So we got Wesley versus Richárd Rapport. And this is round 27. Yes, 27. You know, when they're playing the Blitz games, they get really, really fast. I think it's like 5 minutes and 2, somewhere in there. Anyways, so like I said, this is the round 27. For all of my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you, kamusta, king makaibigan, hello ulit. I appreciate you guys very much for coming by. Maraming salamat for watching and checking me out. Anybody who is coming from Hungary, I will say siya and kusanem for coming by and taking a look at my stuff. I appreciate you guys very much. If you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. Bam. So we do have D4. We got E6. C4. We got C5. So we have a Benoni. Anybody pretty much who's trying to be like very, very high level player, you're not going to play the Benoni. I mean, the Benoni is like basically one of those kind of like, you know, it's kind of one of those, you know, like lower level to intermediate, you know, players will play it. Maybe a higher level player will play it against somebody who's much lower rated, hoping that they don't kind of know the theory and, you know, kind of how to handle it and the ideas. But it is very, very good for white. It's basically, it can be a forced win for white, as long as white knows what they're doing. And you understand the position well enough. But one of the strongest ways to play, if you are going to play the Benoni, is this. You are going to go for this E6, C5 situation. Try to get the C pawn traded off as early as possible. So we do see D5, pawn takes D5, pawn takes D5. It basically tries to make your ideas and what you're trying to do, you know, a little bit easier for you to do. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But we do see D6. D6 is going to have to come. The bishop is kind of blocked in at the moment. And this just holds the C5 pawn for the moment. So we do see knight to C3. We got G6. Bishop comes to F4. We see knight to F6. We got knight to F3. We have A6. And already, as of move 8, we have a part that if you do want to pause the video and see what white plays in this position, go ahead and do so. Blown up over here. All right. So any of you guys that play white and play D4 as white, you are gonna know, you know, the ideas for black. There is pretty much one. There are two ideas in the Benoni for black. One is a queenside expansion, and the other one is basically defending the D6 pawn. And this is why the opening is considered to be pretty dubious, because the D6 pawn is a very real target, and normally white has a way to gang up on the pawn and just completely win it. So you basically strap yourself with a backward pawn on D6 and somewhat of an open king's position. So you have to hurry up and get castled. But there is a lot of play in it. Like I said, I mean, if white doesn't know exactly what they're doing, then you can manage to turn the tables. But that is only if white does not know what they're doing. So like I said, A6 is coming, and you have to prevent the move B5. In this particular situation, normally you have C4 and D5 pawns as white, but because it was traded off earlier, B5 is a very real threat. And you are just trying to like kind of steamroll your pawns down here, go rook to B8, bishop to D7. And you know, this is your whole like goal and idea of playing the Benoni from black. So you have to make sure you prevent that. So the move is A4 in this position. You do have to be careful playing A4 too soon. You definitely don't want to play A4 if B5 isn't capable of being played. You do want to get developed and castled as quickly as possible as white. You definitely don't want to leave your king out there too much. But like I said, after A6, B5 was definitely on tap. And once A6 and B5 is played in this position with no C-pawn, you are pretty doomed. You're not doomed, but, you know, black has basically gotten exactly what they want out of their opening. So you have to prevent that. So we do see bishop to G7. We got E3. We got castles by black. We see H3. You don't really want bishop to G4, so H3 is almost always going to be what you're going to play. Knight comes back to E8. We got bishop to e2, knight goes to d7, and we do have castles by white. The only thing that kind of bothers me about the Benoni personally, majority of the time, like, I do really well against it, but it just kind of seems like, and this is like true with like a lot of other openings, it just kind of seems like even though it's like completely winning, like normally you're up like +1 or more in the opening, it kind of seems like black has so many different things that they can play to make, you know, the game just kind of annoying for you. So that's something that kind of bothers me. But anyways, we do see knight to e5, and we do have a5. A5 is a really good move. It is preventing the moving of these pawns. You are trying to stop, like I said, black's queenside expansion and play as much as possible, because if you could, like, you know, minimize that, black doesn't really have a whole lot that they can do in these positions, especially with the rook, the knight on e8. The rook is not really being used. So, you know, black definitely can run into some development problems. So we do see knight taking f3 with check. Bishop takes f3. We got bishop to d7. We see bishop down to e2. And like I said, a majority of the time you are fighting against black for the control of the b5 square. Like I said, this rook is going to try to come to b8, and you are trying to get this very desirable b5 in. a5 is just making that a lot harder to do. So the rook comes to b8, and then we do see the novelty of the game, and it is queen to d2. This is like a very, you know, standard position in the Benoni. I mean, all of the pieces are pretty much set up pretty much where you're going to want them to be. This bishop is eyeing this pawn, and it forces black to be in a very, very defensive position. So if you don't mind being in a defensive position, feel free to play the Benoni, but you are not going to be playing for an advantage. You know, you're basically going to be sitting back defending the position for like quite a while, and it's very possible that the position could just collapse on you. So be very careful. So we do see queen down to e7. You'll normally see queen to e7 or queen to c7, just protecting this d6 pawn as much as possible. We do see knight to a4. And, I mean, you really don't want to allow knight to come to b6, because if you allow it to redirect to c4, you are putting a really, really crazy amount of pressure here. Then you'll do something about, you know, protecting this pawn and, you know, back the bishop up. And the queen has the ability to start coming into the attack as well. And, you know, there are only so many pieces that you can use to defend d6. So you do not want to allow that. So bishop takes a4. We see rook taking a4. We got b5, which you've gotten the desirable move in, but because it is an en passant moment, you will be seeing pawn takes b6 en passant. Rook takes b6, you got b4, pawn takes b4. You see rook taking b4, rook taking b4, queen taking b4. And like I said, I mean, you have managed to get both of your pieces on this square. You know, now you are putting black in a really, really, like, you know, bind trying to defend this pawn. So we do see bishop to e5. Logical way to try to defend as well. Bishop takes a6. We see knight down to c7. Queen comes to b7. Just pin it and win it. Right now the queen is undefended, so the knight is pinned to the queen. So we do see bishop taking f4. We got pawn taking f4, and then the queen unpins herself going to d8. We see rook to c1, and now something has to give. Knight takes a6. Queen takes a6. You do see queen down to f6, and like I always say before, if you are up material, which, you know, white is up a pawn right now, you do want to try to trade down as much as possible. So, I mean, the move should just be jumping out to you guys. After we see g3, we see rook over to d8. We see rook to c8. And this is the trade that I'm talking about. You know, with two pieces on the board, you have a little bit of play for black, but you do want to try to, you know, trade down as much as possible because you do have an extra pawn. It's just going to be a completely winning endgame. So the rook takes c8. We do see queen taking c8. The king comes down to g7. The queen goes down to c4. You know, you want to make sure that you're protecting this pawn. You don't want to give that pawn away, but you're trying to make sure you stay in the vicinity of this pawn, because if black falls asleep, then you might be able to win a pawn. So we do see h5. The queen comes to b4. The king goes over to h7. Queen comes to e4. King goes back to g7. You know, black is perfectly fine repeating the position and trying to get a draw. But we see king to g2, so we're breaking that cycle. The king goes back to h7. Queen goes back to b4. We see queen to f5. Queen comes to d4. We got king to g8. We see queen back to c4. We see king to h7. And so that we do not repeat again, we see king to h2. We got king up to g8. Queen goes to c6, protecting and attacking at the same time. We do see queen down to e4, and I'm honestly not sure what that move is. I mean, the most logical thing is just to go queen to f6. This is a blitz game, but I mean, you're still kind of thinking just kind of hold and maintain the position that you have. So, you know, queen going to f6 makes a lot of sense because, you know, you're not going to be able to take the pawn. So I'm not exactly sure, you know, what he thought he was doing with queen to e4. But this literally just completely just drops the pawn. So queen takes d6, and you don't really have much else that you can do. You have queen to d4. Trying to attack this pawn, and you're not going to get into a perpetual check, so you see king down to g1, and you know, once queen checks here on d1, you can just move king up to g2, and I mean, you are just not in time to really do anything because I mean, the queen is going to come down here. So, you know, let's just say, for example, we have queen, you know, to d1, you got king up to d2, king up to g2. And I mean, you don't really have time to do anything because the queen is gonna, like I said, sidestep down here. So if you're trying to, you know, check here, queen can go down here, and then this is actually going to be almost forcing the trade after the king comes to h7. You do see queen coming back down to e5. Like I said, you are going to be either forcing the trade or just, you know, making black go to an undesirable square. You know, have to kind of move away, and this pawn is going to start running. And you're going to start attacking things. So this is just completely 1000% won. So like I said, I mean, this game pretty much just kind of went straight down the line of, you know, what a Benoni should look like if you're playing it from the black side. You know, there are, you know, kind of some things you can do. There are kind of like some banco type situations that you can play into, but pretty much anything that you play as far as the Benoni is concerned for black is, I mean, there is very few things you can do in the Benoni that lets you hold on to the position. And even the banco is very, very good for white. So be careful when you're playing these, you know, dubious, risky type openings. You know, I know a lot of you guys out there really like playing that kamikaze crazy stuff. It makes the game fun for you. So feel free. But yes, beware. But I appreciate you guys very much for coming by. Maraming salamat. Aking makaibigan po sa nanonood. And kusanem for anybody coming from Hungary. And I'll see you guys next time.